Hello, here we come to our final talk about the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. I'm reminded of Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 3, which tells us that he upholds all things by the word of his power. How amazing to think that when the Lord, as a baby, was being upheld in the arms of Mary, his mother, he was simultaneously upholding the entire universe by his powerful word. Christ, even as a baby, was never God minus any of his essential elements of deity, but rather was God plus all that he had additionally taken to himself when embracing humanity. Jesus, in his incarnation, through the birth at Bethlehem, did not give up any of the divine attributes, for then he would have ceased to be God. The fact of the two natures of our Lord Jesus, that he was both truly and fully human and truly and fully God, is something that is held by all Bible-believing Christians, who also understand that those two natures in the one person remain distinct with their own properties and attributes. A wrong illustration was introduced historically when people thought about Christ and his incarnation. They thought of a glass of water into which were introduced droplets of ink. And you know what happens? The ink spreads in the water. It diffuses through it, permeating it. And what results is that we no longer have pure water, and we no longer have normal ink either, but a third substance, a mixture, a very diluted ink. It was never like that with our Lord Jesus. The two natures, the human and the divine, in the one person of our Lord Jesus Christ, remain distinct. Each retains its own properties and attributes, and neither changes the other. How wonderful to think that our Lord Jesus, the one born at Bethlehem, will be forever worthy to be worshipped because he's God. But he will also be a worshipper, the lead worshipper of his people as our great high priest. And so we have two natures in the one indivisible Jesus Christ, who always spoke of himself as I and never spoke of himself as we. There are things that are true of his human nature that are not true of his divine nature, and vice versa. Things true of his divine nature that are not true of his human nature. For example, in the Gospels, Jesus hungered and thirsted. Those things were true of his human nature, and never, of course, of his divine nature. But anything that is true of and done by one of Christ's natures is true of and done by the whole person of Christ. Take as an example his words in John 8 and verse 58, when he said, "Before Abraham was, I am." The Lord's human nature did not exist before Abraham, but his divine nature did, and so he can say, "I am." There's a hymn that you have most probably sung. It's by Charles Wesley, and it's the hymn "And Can It Be?" And it contains the line, "'Tis mystery all, the immortal dies." We should clarify that the divine nature of our Lord Jesus Christ could never die. Therefore, we shouldn't speak about the death of Christ as being the death of God. But as we've been saying, the person of Christ could experience death because of the union of the two natures, human and divine, in that one person. You know, careful thinking like that helps us with what is possibly another difficulty. When in Matthew 24 and verse 36, we read that Jesus says he doesn't know the time of his return, and yet he's divinely omniscient. What an amazing mystery of Christ we have, that the same person can both know and not know the same thing at the same time. You know, the truths behind the incarnation, his birth at Bethlehem, are the most astounding realities that the human mind could ever try to grapple with.